Dr. Alan Grant stood at the window of his small office, watching rain tap against the glass. His phone buzzed again. Fourth call in 10 minutes. He sighed and picked it up. Grant speaking. Dr. Grant, this is Lisa Barnes from the Department of Defense. You need to pack a bag immediately. A car will arrive at your home in 1 hour. Alan blinked. Excuse me? What is this about? National security, Dr. Grant? Your expertise in neural mapping is needed. The car will take you to a private airfield. That's all I can say over the phone. The line went dead. Alan stared at his phone, confusion washing over him. His research on brain mapping was cutting edge, but hardly seemed like the stuff of national security. 90 minutes later, Alan sat in a sleek black government car speeding toward an unknown destination. The driver hadn't spoken a word. In the seat beside him was a folder marked Classified that he'd been instructed to read. As Alan flipped through the pages, his heart began to race. 2 days ago, a spacecraft had landed just outside Las Vegas. The occupants had requested peaceful contact and introduced themselves as the Viridians. The document contained photos of tall, slender beings with iridescent skin that shifted colors. Like oil on water, their eyes were large and completely black, set in narrow faces with no visible mouths. The most important detail was highlighted in yellow. The Viridians were telepathic. They had evolved natural mind-reading abilities and used them as their primary form of communication. Now they wanted to study human thought patterns as part of their cultural exchange. That's where Alan came in. His work mapping neural networks had caught someone's attention. The car arrived at a small airfield where a military helicopter waited. Within minutes, they were airborne, flying west into the setting sun. Alan's stomach twisted with a mix of excitement and fear. 3 hours later, the helicopter descended toward a sprawling complex in the Nevada desert. Floodlights illuminated a series of connected buildings surrounded by a high fence. In the center stood what could only be the Viridian ship, a gleaming silver structure shaped like a perfect teardrop. Alan was led through multiple security checkpoints into a conference room where a dozen people sat around a large table. Some wore military uniforms, others lab coats. A woman with short gray hair stood up as he entered. Dr. Grant, thank you for coming on such short notice. I'm Dr. Susan Miller, lead scientist for this operation. Her handshake was firm. Please, have a seat. We're about to begin the briefing. A tall man in a dark suit stepped to the front of the room. For those just joining us, I'm Director Paul Ward. At 0600 hours tomorrow, we will conduct the first official mind-reading exchange with the Viridian ambassador. Dr. Grant will represent humanity in this historic moment. Alan nearly choked. Excuse me, sir? I'm representing all of humanity? I was only told I'd be consulting on neural mapping. Director Ward fixed him with a stern look. Plans changed when the Viridians specifically requested someone with your expertise. Their ambassador, Zixter, will attempt to form a telepathic connection with you while both our teams monitor the process. A wave of murmurs swept through the room. Susan leaned toward Alan. The Viridians have assured us this is completely safe. They've done this with 17 other species across their explorations. And all 17 species survived? Alan asked. Susan hesitated just long enough to make Alan's heart sink. 16 species had positive experiences. One species found it uncomfortable, but suffered no lasting effects. The briefing continued late into the night. Alan learned that the Viridians had arrived peacefully, offering advanced medical knowledge in exchange for cultural understanding. Their technology was centuries beyond Earth's, but they seemed genuinely interested in humans as equals. After the meeting, Susan showed Alan to his quarters, a small but comfortable room with a bed, desk, and bathroom. Try to get some sleep, she said. Tomorrow will be intense. Alan sat on the edge of the bed, too wired to sleep. Susan? Why me? There must be thousands of neuroscientists more qualified. She leaned against the doorframe. Your paper on paradoxical neural networks caught their attention. The way you mapped contradictory thought patterns was apparently fascinating to them. Their minds work differently, pure logic, no contradictions. That sounds limiting. Maybe. They seemed particularly interested in how humans manage to hold contradictory beliefs simultaneously. She smiled slightly, like being terrified and thrilled about meeting aliens. Alan nodded. That about sums it up. Get some rest, Alan, and don't worry too much about representing humanity. Just be yourself. After she left, Alan lay awake for hours. How does one prepare to have their mind read by an alien? Should he try to think positive thoughts? Avoid certain memories? The more he tried to control his thinking, the more random his thoughts became. Dawn arrived too quickly. After a quick shower and breakfast, Alan was led to a large circular room. In the center sat two chairs facing each other, surrounded by monitoring equipment from both human and Viridian design. Susan met him at the door, her face tense despite her reassuring smile. Remember the protocol. Relax, breathe normally, and don't resist the connection when it begins. Alan nodded, his mouth too dry to speak. The door on the opposite side opened, and 3 Viridians entered. 2 were clearly assistants, carrying equipment and checking readings. But the central figure could only be Zixter. The ambassador stood nearly 7 feet tall, skin shifting through blues and purples. Instead of walking, it seemed to glide across the floor. As it approached, Alan noticed fine tendrils where a mouth should be, gently moving as though in a breeze. Zixter stopped before Alan and bowed slightly. One of the human translators spoke. Ambassador Zixter welcomes Dr. Alan Grant and expresses gratitude for this exchange of minds. The ambassador wishes to convey that this process will be gentle and controlled. Alan bowed in return and took his seat. As Zixter sat across from him, Alan couldn't help but wonder what secrets of humanity the alien was about to discover. The room fell silent as Alan sat face to face with Ambassador Zixter. The alien's skin rippled with gentle waves of blue and purple. Around them, scientists from both species adjusted equipment and checked readings. The air felt heavy with anticipation. Dr. Susan Miller approached Alan and placed small sensors on his temples. These will monitor your brain activity, she said quietly. Remember to breathe normally and try to stay calm. Alan nodded, his mouth dry. What exactly should I be thinking about? Nothing specific. Just let your mind flow naturally. Susan squeezed his shoulder. We'll be watching everything. If there's any sign of distress, we'll stop immediately. Director Ward stood at the edge of the room with arms crossed. Dr. Grant, you're making history today. The first human to engage in telepathic communication with an extraterrestrial species. One of the Viridian assistants approached Zixter and attached similar monitoring devices to the ambassador's elongated head. The devices seemed to merge with the alien skin rather than stick to it. The human translator spoke again. Ambassador Zixter wishes to explain the process before beginning. The connection will start gently, like a whisper at the edge of your thoughts. The ambassador will not probe deeply without permission and will withdraw immediately if you feel discomfort. Alan took a deep breath. I understand. I'm ready. Zixter's large black eyes blinked slowly. The tendrils around what might be its mouth moved in complex patterns. The translator continued. The ambassador says that human minds are unlike any they have encountered in their explorations. They are most curious about our capacity for imagination. Susan made a final adjustment to the monitoring equipment. All systems are go on our end. Vital signs stable. The Viridian assistants. made similar confirmations. With all preparations complete, the room grew quiet again. Alan and Zixter stared at each other across the small space between their chairs. At first, Alan felt nothing. He wondered if something was supposed to happen, or if he needed to do something. Then he noticed a strange sensation, like a feather brushing against his thoughts. It wasn't physical, more like becoming aware of a sound that had been playing in the background all along. The sensation grew stronger. Alan could feel a presence, gentle but alien, at the edges of his consciousness. The monitors around them beeped steadily. "Connection established," Susan announced, her voice hushed with wonder. Brain-wave synchronization beginning. The presence in Alan's mind became more distinct. It felt curious, careful, like someone slowly opening a door to peek inside. Alan tried to remain calm, focusing on his breathing as strange impressions flowed through his mind. Colors he had never seen before flickered behind his eyelids. Concepts without words floated through his consciousness. He couldn't tell if these were his thoughts or impressions from Zixter's mind. "Remarkable," Susan whispered, watching the readings. "Their patterns are beginning to align." Alan felt the alien presence grow stronger, more confident. Images from his own life began to surface. His childhood home, his university years, his first major research breakthrough. But they weren't random memories. They seemed to be responses to unspoken questions. The Viridian translator spoke. Softly. "The ambassador is asking about human creativity, how we imagine things that do not exist." Without consciously trying, Alan found himself thinking about art, music, and literature. He remembered reading stories as a child, losing himself in imaginary worlds. He thought about scientific theories, how humans could conceive of concepts like black holes or quantum particles long before they could prove their existence. The alien presence in his mind seemed to pulse with interest. More questions formed, not as words, but as curiosities that pulled specific thoughts forward. How did humans hold contradictory beliefs? How did they cope with knowing they would die? How could they imagine impossible things? Alan didn't try to answer directly. He let his mind flow naturally from thought to thought. He considered the concept of hope, believing things could improve even when evidence suggested otherwise. He thought about faith and doubt existing simultaneously. He reflected on how humans lived meaningful lives despite knowing they were temporary. The monitors tracking their brain activity began to show unusual patterns. The Viridian assistants moved quickly around their equipment, checking readings and exchanging quick communications. "Something's happening," Susan said, her voice tense. "The synchronization is becoming erratic." Alan barely heard her. The connection had deepened beyond simple thought exchange. He felt like he was simultaneously in his own mind and observing it from outside. Strange concepts were flowing both ways now. The gentle presence had become a flood. The room's lights seemed to flicker, though Alan couldn't tell if it was really happening or just in his perception. The alien concepts flowing into his mind were becoming harder to process, ideas without English equivalents, sensations his human brain struggled to interpret. Suddenly, Zixter's skin color changed dramatically, flashing bright orange and red. The tendrils around its face stiffened. The large black eyes widened. "Disconnect them now," Director Ward shouted. "Something's wrong." Before anyone could react, Zixter jerked backward. The chair toppled as the ambassador rose to full height, tendrils fully extended and vibrating. A high-pitched sound filled the room, not coming through the air, but somehow directly inside everyone's minds. The Viridian assistants rushed too. Their ambassador. The human technicians scrambled to shut down equipment. Susan ran to Alan, who sat frozen in his chair, eyes wide with shock. Ambassador Zixter's skin continued to flash through colors. Bright red, deep purple, blinding yellow. The sound grew louder, and now everyone recognized it for what it was: screaming. The alien was screaming inside their minds. And then Zixter collapsed to the floor. Chaos erupted in the room. The Viridian assistants rushed to their fallen ambassador, their normally graceful movements now sharp with urgency. The telepathic screaming had stopped, but the echo of it remained in everyone's minds like the aftershock of an explosion. "What happened?" Director Ward demanded, his face pale. "What did you do, Grant?" Alan sat frozen in his chair, unable to speak. Susan quickly checked his vital signs. "His pulse is racing, but he seems physically fine," she reported. "Alan, you hear me?" Alan nodded slowly, his eyes fixed on the alien lying motionless on the floor. I wasn't trying to hurt anyone." The Viridian medical team arrived, carrying equipment unlike anything the humans had seen before. They surrounded Zixter, their skin colors shifting through deep blues and greens as they worked. One of them placed a small silver device on the ambassador's forehead. It glowed softly. The lead Viridian turned to the human translator and made a series of quick movements with its tendrils. "They're saying the ambassador has suffered neural shock," the translator said. "They need to stabilize." "Zixter before transport." "Transport where?" Ward asked. "Back to their ship. They have better medical facilities there." Susan helped Alan to his feet. His legs felt weak, and a dull headache was forming behind his eyes. "I don't understand what went wrong," he whispered. The connection felt stable until ... double quotes. "Until what?" Susan pressed. Alan struggled to find words. "Until it wasn't just Zixter examining my thoughts. It was like my mind started pushing back, sending human concepts into the alien's consciousness." One of the other Viridians approached the humans. Unlike the assistants, this one wore ornate markings on its silver uniform. The translator listened to its communication before addressing the group. "This is Sub-Commander Nixville. The ambassador is stable but unconscious. The Viridians are ... concerned." The translator hesitated. Perhaps alarmed is more accurate. "They're requesting all data from our monitoring equipment." "Of course," Susan replied. "We want to understand what happened." "As much as they do." Nixville's tendrils moved in what seemed like agitation. The translator continued. "They're also requesting that Dr. Grant be isolated and examined. They believe his mind may be dangerous." "Absolutely not." Ward stepped forward. "Dr. Grant is not a weapon. This was a mutual exchange that you initiated." The room grew tense as humans and aliens stared at each other. Finally, Susan broke the silence. "We should all step back and analyze the data before making accusations. This was unprecedented contact between very different species. Complications were always possible. The medical team had placed Zixter on a floating platform. As they prepared to leave, Alan stepped forward. "Wait," he said. "I need to know if the ambassador will recover." The translator relayed his question. One of the medical team responded with a complex series of movements. "They say the ambassador's neural pathways show trauma unlike anything in their medical records. Recovery is uncertain." As the Viridians left with their injured leader, the humans gathered around the monitoring equipment. Susan began reviewing the data immediately. "These readings are extraordinary," she said. "Look at the spike here when the connection deepened. It's like something overloaded." Alan rubbed his temples. The headache was getting worse, and strange images kept flashing through his mind, alien concepts that had leaked through the connection. "They said my mind was dangerous," he said quietly. "What does that mean?" Ward looked troubled. "It means we need to be very careful how we proceed. If this incident is seen as an attack, it could end peaceful contact before it truly begins." A junior scientist called Susan over to his monitor. "Dr. Miller, I think you should see this." The ambassador's neural activity just before collapse. It looks like a cascade failure. Susan studied the readings. It's as if Zixther's mind encountered something it couldn't process, a logic contradiction or paradox that triggered system-wide. Failure, like dividing by zero in a computer program, the young scientist suggested. Alan felt a chill. That's what it felt like at the end. I was thinking about human contradictions, how we can feel hope and despair simultaneously, how we accept our mortality but live as if we'll last forever. Zixther seemed fascinated, but also ... confused. The door opened and a grim-faced military officer entered. We have a situation. The Viridians have suspended all scheduled meetings and communications. They've withdrawn to their ship and increased their security field. They think we attacked them, Ward said, more statement than question. Worse, the officer replied. They've sent one message. Humans harbor dangerous minds. Alan sat heavily in a chair. I've single-handedly ruined first contact with an advanced alien species. Don't jump to conclusions, Susan said firmly. This is a setback, not an ending. As the others discussed diplomatic strategies, Alan closed his eyes. The headache was now a steady pulse behind his eyes. And something else was happening. He kept seeing flashes of alien memories that weren't his own. Zixther's consciousness had left something behind in his mind. That night, Alan lay in his bed staring at the ceiling. Security had been doubled around his quarters. Whether to protect him or contain him, he wasn't sure. Every time he closed his eyes, strange visions filled his mind. Alien worlds, incomprehensible technologies, and concepts that human language couldn't express. Just as he finally began to drift into sleep, an alarm blared through the facility. Alan jumped up and ran to the door, but it was locked from the outside. Through the small window, he saw personnel running down the hallway. Something was happening. He pounded on the door until a guard stopped. What's going on? Alan shouted. The guard looked nervous. The ambassador is awake, and it's asking for you. 2 guards escorted Alan through the facility's corridors. His heart pounded as they approached a new section he hadn't seen before. The walls here were lined with a strange material that seemed to absorb sound. Each step became quieter then. The last Director Ward and Susan waited outside a large door with metallic symbols etched into its surface. The ambassador regained consciousness an hour ago, Susan explained. Its condition is stable, but ... Changed. Changed how? Alan asked. Susan hesitated. The Viridians won't say exactly. But Zixther has refused to speak with anyone except you. Ward stepped closer to Alan. We need to understand what happened during that mind link. The future of human-Viridian relations may depend on it. Be careful what you say in there. Alan nodded, his mouth dry. The door slid open silently, revealing a dimly lit room. The air inside felt different, heavier, with a slight electric charge that made the hair on Alan's arms stand up. Ambassador Zixther reclined on a curved platform in the center of the room. The alien skin no longer shifted through vibrant colors, but had settled into a pale blue. 2 Viridian attendants stood nearby, their posture tense. Dr. Grant, Zixther's voice sounded directly in Alan's mind. Please approach. Alan walked forward slowly. The Viridian attendants moved back, their tendrils twitching with what seemed like nervousness. You can hear me speaking in your mind, Zixther observed. The connection between us persists, though weakened. Interesting. Are you ... recovering? Alan asked aloud. Recovery implies returning to a previous state. That is impossible now. The alien's large eyes blinked slowly. I requested this meeting because we must discuss what happened. Alan stood before the reclining ambassador, noticing how the alien's normally fluid movements now seemed stiff And, "Careful. I didn't mean to harm you," Alan said. "I don't understand what went wrong." "Nothing went wrong, Dr. Grant. Something unexpected occurred." Zixther's mental voice had a strange quality now, almost like two voices speaking together. "Your mind contains impossibilities." Impossibilities? In all our explorations across 17 sentient species, we have never encountered minds. Like human minds. The ambassador's tendrils moved in slow, deliberate patterns. Other species think in logical sequences. Even their emotional responses follow predictable patterns. But humans... Zixther paused, his skin around its eyes darkening. Slightly. Humans hold contradictory thoughts simultaneously without distress. You believe contradictory things. You feel opposing emotions at once. You imagine what does not and cannot exist. The alien shifted uncomfortably. Such thinking would drive a Viridian insane. Alan remembered his thoughts during the connection. How he had considered human paradoxes, imagination, and contradictions. Is that what happened? My normal human thinking patterns hurt you? When our minds connected deeply, I experienced human consciousness directly. Your ability to hold logical contradictions created impossible patterns in my neural structure. Zixther's mental voice grew quieter. The closest comparison would be trying to divide by 0 in your computing systems, a function that crashes. The program. One of the attendants moved forward, making quick gestures with its tendrils. My medical team is concerned. Speaking of these matters causes neural stress, Zixther explained. But this must be discussed. The implications are too important. Alan felt a strange mixture of guilt and wonder. I never realized our minds were so different. Consider this example, Zixther continued. Humans know with certainty that they will die, yet you live as if you will not. You make long-term plans. You plant trees whose shade you will never sit under. This contradiction would paralyze a Viridian mind. That's just ... being human, Alan said. Precisely. What is normal for you is extraordinary elsewhere. The ambassador's skin flickered briefly with colors. The concept of fiction alone was nearly fatal to me. You create elaborate falsehoods and become emotionally invested in them, knowing they are not real. Alan felt a sudden chill. Ambassador, are we dangerous to you? Will this end contact between our species? Zixther was silent for a moment. I have been changed by contact with your mind, Dr. Grant. Parts of my neural pathways have been permanently altered. The Viridian High Council considers this a contamination. They have ordered our mission to leave Earth immediately. Alan's heart sank. First contact had been a disaster after all. However, Zixther continued, I have refused this order. The attendants moved in obvious agitation, but the ambassador raised a hand to silence them. The experience was traumatic, but revelatory. Your mind showed me possibilities beyond Viridian understanding. I believe contact must continue, though with new safeguards. Alan felt hope rising. What kind of safeguards? Direct telepathic contact must be limited and filtered. We will develop technologies to translate human thought patterns without the raw exposure that damaged me. Zixther's mental voice grew stronger. But more importantly, the galaxy should know about human minds. Know what about them? That they are unique, powerful, unlike anything we have encountered. The ambassador's skin briefly flashed with bright colors. In the greater galactic community, there are species with advanced technology, superior physical abilities, or greater numbers, but none think like humans do. Susan and Director Ward entered the room cautiously. They had been listening from outside. Ambassador, Ward said, does this mean diplomatic relations will continue? They must, Zixther replied, the mental voice now reaching all of them. But not as originally planned. Humans are not just another. Species to catalog. You are something unprecedented. The ambassadors' attendants communicated rapidly with each other, clearly concerned about their leader's statements. I must rest now, Zixter said. The neural reconstruction requires energy. But remember this, Dr. Grant. What nearly destroyed me may be humanity's greatest strength among the stars. As they left the room, Alan felt the lingering connection, with the alien mind slowly fading. But something remained, a new awareness of just how extraordinary the ordinary human mind truly was. What happens now? He asked Susan as they walked back through the quiet corridors. Now, she said with a small smile, we prepare to introduce humanity to the galaxy, not as the newcomers we thought we were, but as something the universe has never seen before. 3 months passed since the mind-reading incident. The Nevada facility had transformed from a secret meeting place to a bustling center of interspecies diplomacy. New buildings had sprung up around the original complex, and ships from 2 other. Alien species now rested beside the Viridian vessel. Allen stood by the window of his new office, watching a group of human scientists escorting a delegation of Raxians, small, 6-limbed beings with crystalline skin who had arrived just last week. News of what happened with Zixter had spread quickly through nearby star systems. Dr. Grant, they're ready for you in the main conference room, said Kelly, his assistant. Alan nodded and straightened his tie. These diplomatic meetings still made him nervous, but he was getting better at them. He was, after all, the human who had accidentally proven that human minds were special. The conference room was filled with representatives from Earth's major nations, along with delegates from the 3 alien species now in contact with humanity. At the center table sat Ambassador Zixter, now fully recovered but permanently changed. The ambassador's skin no longer shifted through colors, but remained a blend of blue and violet, with occasional flashes of gold, a visible sign of the full neural restructuring caused by exposure to human thought patterns. Beside Zixter sat the Mrellan ambassador, a tall insectoid being whose compound eyes reflected light like prisms. The newly arrived Raxian representative completed the alien delegation, its crystalline body humming softly. Director Ward opened the meeting. Today marks a significant step forward in human-galactic relations. The Galactic Council has officially responded to our application for recognition. A murmur ran through the human side of the room. They had been waiting for this response for weeks. Ambassador Zixter rose to speak, its voice projected into everyone's minds. The Council's decision was not easy. No species has joined the galactic community with so little technological advancement. By normal standards, humans would be considered at least 3 centuries away from qualification. Some of the human officials looked disappointed, but Zixter continued. However, normal standards do not apply to humans. The Council has created a new classification specifically for Earth, paradox thinkers. This designation acknowledges the unique qualities of human consciousness and its potential value to the greater community. The Mrellan ambassador clicked its mandibles together, their version of applause. My species has reviewed the data from the initial mind-reading incident, it said through a translator device. We find humans fascinating. Your ability to innovate through illogical connections is unparalleled. Alan caught Susan's eye across the room. She smiled and gave him a subtle thumbs up. Their work developing a translation filter had made it possible for other species to study human thought patterns safely, without the direct exposure that had nearly destroyed Zixter. The Raxian representative rose next, its crystal body creating rainbow patterns on the walls. The Raxian collective was initially skeptical. Its translator device buzzed. We believed reports of human mental abilities were exaggerated. We were wrong. Your species' capacity for abstract thought and imaginative problem-solving is remarkable. Director. Ward stepped forward again. What does this new classification mean for Earth? Practically speaking, Zixther's tendrils moved in what humans now recognized as their equivalent of a smile. It means, Director, that Earth will receive technological and scientific knowledge beyond what would normally be shared with the developing world. The Council believes human creativity combined with advanced knowledge will yield unique solutions to problems that have challenged other species for centuries. The room erupted in excited conversation. This was better than anyone had hoped, for Allen was asked to speak next. He had become reluctantly the face of humanity to the stars. He stood and the room quieted. 3 months ago, I thought I had ruined humanity's first contact by nearly killing Ambassador Zixther with my ordinary thoughts, he began. I now understand that what seemed ordinary to me was extraordinary to the rest of the galaxy. He paused, looking around at the diverse beings gathered in the room. Humans have always felt small in the universe. We've looked up at the stars and imagined vastly superior civilizations. We were prepared to be the newcomers, the students learning from ancient species. Allen smiled. Instead, we've discovered that our minds offer something unique. Our contradictions and paradoxes, our ability to imagine the impossible, these are gifts we can share with the galaxy. The Mrellan ambassador clicked its approval. The Raxian's crystal body glowed brighter. Zixther's skin flashed with golden patterns. After the meeting, Allen walked with Susan through the facility's garden, designed with plants from all 4 worlds. Represented at the base, I received a message from the Viridian Science Academy this morning, Susan said. They want to establish a joint research center focused on human creativity. They believe studying our art, music, and literature may help them develop new approaches to technology. Allen laughed. So our fiction, which nearly killed Zixther, is now considered valuable research material? Exactly. The Mrellans are particularly interested in human humor. They don't understand why we find contradictions and surprises amusing. They stopped by a small pond where earthfish swam alongside luminescent viridian water creatures. There's something else, Susan said more seriously. Intelligence reports suggest that several potentially hostile species have reconsidered their plans regarding Earth. Allen raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? Apparently, word has spread about what happened to Zixther. Some species now believe humans possess dangerous mental abilities. They're not entirely wrong, Susan smiled. Your ordinary human mind is considered a weapon of mass confusion. Allen watched the fish swimming in peaceful circles. So our greatest defense among the stars isn't our technology or military strength, but our messy, contradictory, imaginative minds? It appears so, Susan replied. Humanity's place in the galaxy will be unlike any other species. Not the strongest or most advanced, but perhaps the most creatively disruptive. As the sun set over the facility, alien and human staff walked together through the gardens. 3 months ago, they had been strangers divided by vast differences. Now they were partners, each bringing unique strengths to their shared future. Ambassador Zixther approached Allen as darkness fell. The alien's modified consciousness now allowed it to appreciate the beauty of Earth's sunset, a concept that would have seemed pointless to it before exposure to human thinking. Dr. Grant, Zixther said, its mental voice gentle in Allen's mind. In all our explorations across the stars, we never expected to find minds like yours on this small blue planet. What you consider ordinary, we now understand is extraordinary. The universe will never be the same.